The record should reflect that Mr. Holmes is present with his attorneys and the prosecutors are present as well. Are you ready to proceed, Ms. Stitch McGuire?
Yes, Your Honor. With the court's permission, we'd like to attempt to play that video again. We tested it over break and were able to get some sound. So if we could play Caleb Medley's video, please.
Yes.
How's everybody doing? It's a Friday. I said, how's everybody doing? That's better. Real quick, I want to thank everybody for coming out, and be sure to go ahead and give a round of applause for the wait staff and the bartenders tonight. Lloyd, your inhibition since 7 o'clock. So let's get started. My name is Caleb Medley, and no, I've not lost weight, but thanks for pretending to notice. Yes, things up here tonight are going to be fatter than they appear. It's not that I try to stay fat. It's, I actually want to try to lose weight. I just don't want to get so fat that the back of my neck looks like a pack of hot dogs, So I went out and joined a gym. That was really awkward because the first thing that happened is I walked up to the girl at the counter and she looked at me. I see McRib is back, huh? Hey Greg, I got a hard one for you. So they assigned me this personal trainer whose IQ is just above that of the Jersey Shorecast. You know what I'm talking about.
The people call attempted murder victim Yusuf Garbi.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. My name's Yusuf Garbi, Yousefgarbi. So, July 20th, 2012 obviously was a bad night. Obviously it impacted people in a lot of negative ways, but it also, me personally, it taught me a lot of positive things. I was shot in the right side of my head. I went through a real rough time right after the shooting, but like I said, I learned a lot of positive things. I learned how to love. It enabled me to love deeper and stronger and harder more than I ever had. And I don't know, I valued that through this experience because you can never love enough. And having, 12 amazing people taken away from us over nothing just shows that you can never love too much or too passionately because your time here is limited and death is the only thing that's promised. So just to love while you can, while the opportunity presents itself, and you never do any harm by loving. And that's about it. That's about what I have to say.
Okay, thank you.
Amy Garbi?
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. Amy Garbi, Ameegharbi. My son, who is just up here, Yusuf Garbi, is one of the survivors of the theater shooting, having sustained a gunshot to the right side of his head, which is now home to a bullet for the rest of his life. It's unfortunate that too many times in the last 20 years, parents have had to sit and wait to find out if their child was safe, injured, or even alive. It's a nightmare that no parent should ever have to endure. Because of what one man did, the nightmare became reality for myself and over 100 other parents that horrible night in July 2012. My nightmare began with a voicemail from my son's friend saying something bad had happened. The next call was my ex-husband advising me that our son was believed to have been shot. The last call was the one I made to my son's cell phone, only to find it was off because it went straight to voicemail. This was the same phone that he had called me from at 10:14 p.m. Thursday, July 19th, to say how bored he was waiting in line for the movie. From there, it was a mad rush for us all to go hospital to hospital, looking for my son, believing he would call as soon as he could. But he didn't. The fear and anxiety of not knowing where my son was, whether he was alive or dead, severely injured, or just a scrape, became a grueling pain in my chest that lasted for 4.5 hours. And then it became something much worse. Relief at finding my son was short-lived when I dropped to my knees in a trauma room, seeing my son tubed, unconscious, and the right side of his head shaved and covered in dry blood. That was the beginning of my nightmare, and it's a nightmare that's been replayed over and over for 3 years. The fear, worry, heartache, loneliness, anger, pain, and utter hatred that has emerged from me is one that will take years to heal or accept as part of myself. Yeah, my son's alive, walking, talking, being himself, yet he's different. He has anxiety, a learning disability. He has to deal with day-to-day memory loss. And who knows what else he'll have to deal with as he gets older, all because someone does not even know him, attempted to take his life. I'm different too. I doubt everyone I meet. I scan every room I walk into. I get anxious if I go to a movie after 1 o'clock in the afternoon. I slept with the lights on in my home for 5 months when I finally got back there after living in hospitals with my son for 35 days. I have vivid memories and flashbacks of walking into a room of the trauma unit at University Hospital, still unaware of my son's injuries, to find that half his skull had been removed to allow his brain to heal from being shot in the front right side of his head. I lived in that same room with him until he was discharged and moved to another facility, which is where I also went. I lived in terror for 9 days, afraid that my son would wake up and not be the same person he was when he walked into that theater. I then lived in fear that something would happen, a car accident or a fall, that would cause the bullet to move or shift, which could also be life-threatening to him now or even years from now. It's a fear I live with on a daily basis and will for the rest of my life. This is my son. I refused to let him go then, and I refuse to let go of him now. I found the strength to live in that trauma room with him, and then another room, and then another room. I never left his side, and I've never forgotten the pain and determination that lived inside me at moments, changing to hatred so hot and heavy that I would physically collapse. But the determination to keep my son, keep him the way he was, with all his laughter, humor, vitality, stubbornness, got me through it. And I would like to think that some of my determination helped Yusuf get through it too. So yes, my son survived by the will of God and the prayer of thousands. But there were others, people who then had no name, who I had no knowledge of, but who now I know by name and by sight, and some whose phone numbers I even have stored in my phone. Their pain is also our pain. Their loss is our loss, and the horror of how we all came to know each other, how we became a different type of family, how we were forced to, is unforgivable. There's nothing that can be said to console those that were lost. I've cried for them many, many times over the last 3 years, people who are no longer with us but whose families I have met. Wonderful people whose pain is more than ours but whom we choose to share that pain with. This crime was the worst this state, perhaps even this country, has witnessed so far. There should be no leniency given to the one responsible. He did not consider my son's life, his future, his family, the friend he was with, so why should any consideration be given to him? My son is innocent, the defendant is not. Those who are no longer with us are innocent, the shooter is not. The loved ones we laid to rest are innocent, this man is not. Your Honor, I ask that you maintain the exceptional respect for our system that you have, but I also ask that you give the strongest, hardest penalty that the law allows to this criminal. The lack of respect of all the people in that theater, what appears to be the absence of regret or sincere sorrow for what he has done, may also be something you could consider when setting his punishment. I'd also like to thank you, Your Honor, for maintaining a sense of integrity and honesty throughout this trial. As well, I'd like to thank the jury and the prosecution for doing a very, very difficult job at doing it so well. My final statement is this. Despite what some self-absorbed, inconsiderate, loveless, heartless killer tried to do, we won. All of the survivors, the victims' families, were the ones who succeeded. We've all gone through the most difficult, heartbreaking, painful experience anyone could ever go through, but we are all still standing. We did not fall. We came together and became something larger and stronger than anything the defendant could ever imagine. So in the end, we won. Our lives are even more meaningful now after what he has done because we live to the fullest extent and we do it for those that we lost so that they will continue to live through us. So in the end, we end up with the most points. We have the most self-worth. Game over. Thank you.
Thank you. Teach McGuire.
Michelle Tuis.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Tell me your name, please.
Michelle Tuis, Michellethuis.
Go ahead.
Okay. In May 2012, I moved alone into a new apartment. It felt cozy. Several people visited, including my very pregnant sister, and I looked forward to more friends visiting. I also had a novel I'd written, and I wanted to revise it. One night I went to bed at 11 a.m. Later, some kids talking outside the window next to my bed woke me up. I ignored them, but they started banging on the locked front door of the building. Because that door was in the same wall that my bed was pushed up against, it was extremely loud. I never realized before how much can be communicated by crashes on a door, but immediately I realized several things that ended up being true. These were not kids. They were full-grown, very large men. They were deadly. They were determined to actually break into the building and didn't care if it was loud. They were extremely strong and wanted something very specific, and they were running on dangerously high levels of adrenaline. I've never felt such terror in my life. It isn't fear, it's beyond fear. It erases fear and every other emotion. It numbs you. In the time it took me to stand up and look outside through my blinds, they were already out of sight inside the building. They got into the building in seconds. Breaking through my apartment door would be far easier, and there was nothing substantial protecting me from them. Gangs or drugs seemed pretty far-fetched for this apartment building. I was the only girl living on the first floor. What if they'd seen me through the window and were there to rape me? I couldn't think of anything else. They were very obviously ready to kill. Would they kill me? Even many people who know me don't realize that despite not being in the theater, I still feared for my life that night and still thought I would probably die. It's hard to explain how violently they broke in or how that affected how I saw them. When the police finally knocked on my door, I was physically shocked to find 6 SWAT officers carrying huge rifles. 6 more were down the hall at the other apartments, and I heard just as many upstairs. When they got us outside to the corner of the street, they didn't want us going within sight of the building, yelling, "Do you want to get shot?" It was such a beautiful night. One officer told us there were around 30 officers there. I even saw a police dog clear from Castle Rock. They didn't tell us what was going on, just that there was an incident in another location and they thought the guy lived there. Today, I know the men who broke in were police. They rushed into a building they thought could explode, risking their lives, and they did it to save ours. Today, whenever I see an Aurora police car, my first thought is, what speed am I going? And then I just feel this overwhelming sense of peace and safety and gratitude. But you have to understand that none of that erases the 10 to 20 minutes I thought they'd rape or kill me. Mentally, I get it. But physically, that kind of fight-or-flight terror, that reaction of freezing when you see no way out, it works its way into your body. It's not gone. I never want to feel that way again, but in a way I feel it every day. In addition, it's hard to explain what it feels like knowing something nearly blew me up or burnt me to death. It's like a sort of tingly feeling all through my body, like I'm some kind of fragile bubble, hollow and easily popped and erased from existence. Like I'm floating away and there's nothing to hold me to the ground. I felt this way constantly for months, and I still feel it too often. I didn't have my car for days. I was homeless for a week. And now I know that the agencies disabled the explosives in a day or two, but at the time I thought it was taking all week. So for a week I was fearing for their lives. Again, that works its way into your body. I needed rest and to feel safe. Instead, before I'd even had a chance to sleep the morning of the 20th, I'd had probably 15 calls from reporters. Now they got my number is still a mystery, but I know they lied to me about it. I watched as my landlady was offered $10,000 from a British reporter to see the building's hallway. It's a hallway. She refused to earn money off murder, but it shows you there were vast amounts of money made off of our pain. The media exploited us, plain and simple. They were invasive, manipulative, aggressive, showing a lack of concern for victims that astounds me. This went on for months. These stories are ours. This pain is ours. And I feel so angry now every time I see a photo of an anguished face, because that is a private moment they had no right to earn money on, and they do. Many days I had to spend hours in darkness with my blinds shut. One day I closed them because a reporter had his camera across the street, and after a few minutes I peeked out to find him gone. I went to my bedroom to open the blinds, and he was standing in our grass pointing his camera at our windows. My safe, private, cozy, solid den of an apartment I'd moved into now felt like a tent made of porous wax paper, easily blown away by explosive force, burned quickly to ashes, translucent as the entire world tried to see inside, and full of holes for trespassers to enter. The one thing going for my home was that lightning doesn't strike twice. We joked about how it was the safest place in the world because what were the odds of anything else happening? Until a week after the evacuation ended and someone committed arson across the street and 2 more people died. I learned we're never safe no matter where we are. Every moment of every day is a balancing act staring down the edge of a cliff. And go do that. Stand on a cliff and look down. You'll know how I permanently feel these days. It's exhausting. Sometimes I feel scared to leave home because of how easy it is to die. And then I remember home is no safer and I'm able to get out and live. Because what difference does it make? I met a woman who'd been in the theater. I told her I thought it must have been worse there than the apartment. She told me something along the lines of, "Don't say that. For us, it was horrible. At least afterwards, we were able to go back to our homes. But he attacked you in your home. Where can you go now?" I never used to have nightmares because I can control my dreams. Now I do. I can't tell you how many fires I've watched, how many bombs have blown up, how many people I found in pools of blood, or how many times I've been shot in the head. I don't wake up and go, "Oh, phew, just a dream." It feels real, so I wake up with a real life or death, fight or flight physical response. That response changes lives, and I have to deal with it on a regular basis for nothing but figments of my imagination. I haven't worked much on my novel because my mind feels tired and fuzzy. I guess thinking about life and death is hard work. I struggle with physical weakness, especially at home. One time I got dehydrated because I sat thirsty on the couch for 2 hours, unable to get up and walk 10 feet to the kitchen to get a glass of water. It was too difficult physically. I couldn't even get the energy to drink water. How could I look for a job? I was jobless for a year. Besides no energy, job interviews themselves became problematic. Interviewers always ask, "Tell me about yourself." For a long time, the only thing that went through my mind was, well, I was nearly murdered, and lots of people died, and you saw it on the news, and I don't want you knowing I was involved. So then I'd freeze, unable to talk. It made interviews pretty awkward. Because my home and then my privacy were invaded so harshly, I've developed an extreme need for privacy. These days, I struggle immensely to tell people anything about myself. Even wearing a name tag at work feels scary and too revealing. I have many kinds of flashbacks. The first, I was eating in a restaurant. There was a loud rumble, and I thought, "What's that, thunder?" But it sounded nothing like thunder, and I knew it was a bomb and we were all about to die. I experienced a deep peace, ready, until I realized everybody was inexplicably still eating, not a care in the world. It was just thunder, and I couldn't even hear it right. The letdown left me shaking and crying in a bathroom. After finding out I'd nearly died, colors appeared impossibly bright for weeks, but then the world turned gray for several years. I can still see color to tell you what it is, but it's dull enough to make life dull. I wonder if it's a physical or hormonal change caused by stress. Needless to say, I've been diagnosed with PTSD. I was told that when at work, shopping, anywhere not at home, it's mild, but at home it becomes severe PTSD. Not this pop culture vague, pervasive, undefined mental illness that makes me a crazy, raging person. Paradoxically, it has made me braver, kinder, more rational, more calm, and less angry even in bad situations. One of the worst things of this entire situation is how voiceless we are. Obviously, the defendant stole our voices by not caring what we wanted, but that wasn't the end of it. For example, he didn't attempt to murder 70 people. He attempted to kill hundreds of us. When it comes to charges, he got off lucky. I understand why, I even support it, but I don't like it. Another thing that made me feel voiceless is all the reporters, newspaper editors, parents of some individuals, and regular people who said the prosecution should have taken the plea bargain and not gone to trial because trial will be too difficult and traumatic for victims. I am one of those faceless people included in the phrase, the victims. When that phrase is used, they are speaking in my name. Not only me, but definitely me. And I resent being used that way. If people didn't want a trial for their own reasons, be honest. Don't say it's for me, because I did want this trial. It was difficult, but like a vaccine, painful at first and healing in the long run. It is healing to know there are so many people who care passionately enough to spend years fighting this case and not give up because it's hard or expensive or a reason to attack their character. And it was healing because it brought about something closer to justice. The defendant's victims are no longer the only ones who have feared for our lives. The defendant lived in fear of it not for minutes but years, and only the rather random chance of a jury pool stood between him and death. Having experienced fear of death, and then knowing I lived by chance, I know what a horrific scar this leaves. Now the defendant has to live with it too, and that is a justice we received because of the choice to go to trial. My voice is also stolen every time people use mental illness as the reason for crimes. The problem is, by going through this event, many of us were forced to live with this label of mentally ill. How many of us have PTSD now, have severe mental illness? I agree with one thing. The defendant is not a monster. Monsters are nothing but beasts, vicious but innocent. But the defendant chose to be selfish in a way that only humans are capable of. He is no monster. And don't think for a second that this mentally ill peer of the defendant wants her voice used to give him any slack for what he did. Not reporters, parents, lawyers, editors, advocates, none of them speak for me. It is incredibly demeaning every time people try. It's emotionally very difficult to see it happen so often. I have my own voice. Perhaps people think it's okay to demean us in this way. Probably they simply don't realize how incredibly demeaning it can be. I've started taking martial arts classes. I'm living with my parents now for many different reasons, all directly related to what happened. I found a wonderfully boring job that is perfect antidote for the adventure my life has been lately, and I need that, but it's far below what I'm capable of. Because of this crime, I was given an unbearable choice. Support the death penalty or life in prison. I won't tell you what I chose, but I will tell you what I felt. By not supporting the death penalty, I felt partially responsible for the victims' deaths, and that I'm part of a society that does not assign infinite value to innocent people by demanding an infinite price for their murder. On the other hand, by supporting the death penalty, I'm trying to have someone killed. This choice, either way, did not leave me feeling guilty, but it did leave me feeling like I had had a part in killing at least someone. Of course, I haven't killed. The feeling isn't rational. I know that. Not choosing was a choice by default. This is the first time in my life I have felt older, ancient even. I wish with all my heart I'd never been confronted with it, but one man's choice is forced that, and I hold that against him. When I was in college, I did Hurricane Katrina disaster relief work. After successfully gutting houses, then trying ineffectually to help rebuild them, I learned one thing. It is so much easier to destroy than to build. The defendant succeeded in killing 12 people. Then again, he also succeeded in earning a bachelor's degree. But his actual goals, the PhD, the murder of hundreds of people, the booby trap exploding, he failed. That's why I'm here today. That's why I'm here today to think, wow, he not only failed at building, but he couldn't even succeed at the much easier task of destruction. How utterly pathetic. It's really pretty wonderful.
Thank you. Ms. Teach McGuire?
Robert Sullivan.
Mr. Sullivan, good afternoon.
Good afternoon. My name's Robert Sullivan, R-O-B-E-R-T-S-U-L-L-I-V-A-N. Where does one begin in advocating for a deceased 6-year-old child? The aftermath of the act speaks for itself, yet so much of the gaping void that remains after her shocking and terrifying death needs to be addressed and demands redress. This inexplicably horrible and atrocious act left an extremely deeply gouged and gaping wound in our minds and our souls. A wound that after 3 years absolutely won't ease, much less heal. It never will. I know this. I've dealt with the death of loved ones in my life and know the difficulties, sadness, sense of loss, and potential feelings of misplaced guilt, as if there were something I could have possibly done to preempt the inevitable. However, with the death of a child, especially in such horrific circumstances, and in such a cruel and deliberately malicious manner, there is absolutely nothing which can prepare one or indeed compare with the excruciatingly intense pain of losing a child. It is a profound and unique horror all unto itself, and only those unfortunate enough to have experienced it can truly understand the debilitating effects and depths of damage that this is incurred. To this day, I have tirelessly endeavored to find some resolution to Veronica's death, but I simply cannot. Sadly, I don't believe I ever will be able to. It will remain an extremely painful and ever-present burden which we each will have to cope with to our dying day. My love for Veronica and her father gave me the inner strength to persevere in the face of overwhelming adversity in keeping our small family together and functioning in the wake of her premature and violent death. I cannot overstate the difficulty in that task. Extreme anger, depression, and the utter helplessness that defines victims' anguish in the wake of such loss is only compounded by the protracted length of time taken to resolve the actual crime itself. The high-profile nature of the tragedy precluded any hope of privacy, thereby severely compromising any time simply for grieving, an essential and necessary process in coping with death. The great tempest that characterized the immediate aftermath of the atrocity, with media, governmental officials, extended family, friends, co-workers, and numerous acquaintances all interacting and interfering in our lives. I had to keep reminding Ian of the necessity of keeping his focus upon Veronica and not to succumb to the overwhelming and incalculable number of calls, texts, unannounced visits, requests for interviews, etc., that threatened to unhinge his already fragile state of mind. These are but a few of the aspects we have had to deal with, and some of those that continue to this day. They cannot be minimized or overlooked. My only solace is in the fact of being blessed by having had such an angelic little girl as my only grandchild, as brief as it came to be. And I hold dear the memories of her. One of the most poignant was the day of her continuance at her school on May 25th, 2012. The day before, we received a phone call from her mother, Ashley, asking if Sue and I could attend Veronica's ceremony at her grade school because she wouldn't be able to because of her father's funeral, and our son Ian was working. Ashley and her family had to attend that funeral the very same day. I told her that of course we would attend Veronica's continuation ceremony. I vividly remember arriving at her school's auditorium and the large number of families in the seating area. I had taken a little pocket camera to record the event, and after searching the numerous faces of children on the stage, I found Veronica's. I remember feeling so sorry for her as she looked so forlorn without recognizing any of her family in the audience. I started taking pictures of her surrounded by her classmates and then paused for one, zooming in on her to capture her expression when she finally caught our eye. Her face brightened immediately and smiled when she finally saw us in the crowd. She then waved, and that's when I snapped the picture that graces the face of the pins we wear and that have been published in the closing statements. To me, this photo captures her essence, that of a sweet, sensitive, innocent, and angelic little girl. My heart soared. When she saw us and smiled. That sweet little face lit up as she finally found some of her loved ones in the crowd. She became much more animated with her friends as she pointed us out to them. I was so happy to be there for her in this, her first ceremony of continuation in school. She was so proud and her face beamed. She was so excited afterwards and told her teacher and principal about us, so they took pictures of the three of us together. Of course, there are many, many other fond memories that we have of her, and I cherish them, as they are all we have, all that remains of her. I think of her soft brown eyes, so innocent, so sensitive, as if kissed by the sun's warm summer rays. Her laughter and squeals of childish delight sometimes echo in those haunted corridors of my mind. Still seeking, running, playing, always full of life and life's promise and enthusiasm for new things. Absolute wonder, limitless opportunities, and undiscovered promise her whole new world presented, reflected in those bright eyes. All sadly unfulfilled, unrequited. She has and will always remain in those hallowed reaches of my heart and mind. It was specifically on Friday, the 20th, 2012. There was so much crammed into that day. From the time my wife and I found out, when my son screamed through our open bedroom window because he didn't live with us. It was 3:30 in the morning and woke us up to the fact that there had been a shooting. And at that time, we didn't know any of the background, but were led to believe from a phone call that he had received that it might have been at a party. It wasn't until later that we found out it was at the theater. When I think back, we didn't know that she was dead. We had heard that Ashley had been shot. We didn't know the condition of Veronica or if she had been injured. But my son took off in a frenzy to go find out where she might be. I tried to interrupt him, stating that until we have more evidence, there's no point in running off to hospitals to see if she may have been admitted. He was determined, and he went to Children's Hospital. He had found out that there were victims from a theater shooting that had been taken to other area hospitals. He was directed to University Hospital. He called us to tell us he was on his way there, and at some point indicated to turn the television on. I didn't know why, what that had to do with anything, but we did. And of course, it was all over the news, even at that early hour. And my first thought was, a movie theater? What could she have been doing there? But nonetheless, we waited for our son to call back with any update if he had found what had happened with her. And this is forever etched into my mind. The next phone call we received, him completely scream. My daughter is dead. It was like a lightning bolt. I didn't know how, why. Just those words. And that was it. My wife standing next to me. I don't want to recount her thoughts and feelings. We went to the hospital to catch up with our son, to see what we could find out, what had happened to Veronica, what had happened to Ashley. It wasn't at a party, apparently, it was at a movie theater. And as the TV's going in the background, just getting little bits of information, we hurriedly get dressed. We go to the hospital. When we get there, we found that our son had already taken off with Ashley's mother and her husband because Ashley had been taken to another hospital. We then drove to that hospital, and Ashley was in surgery. And we knew from talking to the people there that she was in surgery and that she may well not survive. Amid all this tumult, we went in to see the rest of her family in the waiting room, gave them our condolences, our thoughts, and asked if they would just call us when they found out Ashley's condition when she came out of surgery. The drive home also was like a dream, dealing with the sudden shock and loss of our only grandchild, and then the people that poured into the home when we got home. As I said, all manner of friends, co-workers, so many people. And my son was almost delirious. But I knew I had to hold this family together. That was my responsibility, to keep it from falling apart. And throughout all of this, my thoughts were consumed with Veronica. When I think back to that time, it's as clear as it can be. I worried for her, even though she had passed on now. My thoughts, my concerns were with this 6-year-old. For what does a 6-year-old comprehend of death? It's limited at best. But to lose your life, I couldn't imagine crossing the barrier from life to death. What is she now facing? What is she experiencing? Did she go into the open, loving arms of her other grandfather, who was buried just 2 months before? Was he waiting? Was he waiting for her? But I tried to reach to her And all the while, seeing my son with a deluge of phone calls and text messages and friends, and seeing him ricocheting off the walls. I felt so bad for him, and I tried to do what I could to focus his mind, to let him know, don't pay attention to any of that. You need to think of her. Concentrate. Think of her. Where is she now? Put your mind there. Remember her. As I say, it was near impossible. There were so many forces, his friends, his co-workers, all the people he knew through the social media, all forcing their way in. And what about Dad? Well, he knows his dad, but does he listen to his dad? What about in this time of crisis, at the height of it? Is he going to listen? Can he? Can he digest what I'm telling him? As I said, I've dealt with death before, but never a child. I did my best, and that's all I could do. 2 weeks later, after all of the attention, just was too much, and I had to take off. I took my trail bike to the mountains by myself with the sole purpose, again, of trying to reach out to Veronica, trying to make some contact, trying to breach that barrier. I didn't want anybody around me. I didn't want any distractions. And I recall the very first evening, it was twilight. The sun was down. The colors were gone. Just shades of gray. The only sound was this babbling, gurgling brook. And the only sights were the silhouettes of the pine trees and the mountain peaks. The soft, cool, pine-scented fragrance in the air. And it was there that I endeavored to reach to her. Whether it is correct or not, I don't know. But it was my impression that she could see us. She could see her loved ones who were alive. And she tried to communicate, but did not understand how to reach to the living. She had tried, but I'm not sure. Nonetheless, I felt compelled when I regained my composure to start on a tribute that would culminate essentially in her eulogy. This is in early August, and we now knew the extent of Ashley's injuries. in the protracted amount of time that was required for her rehabilitation before we could lay Veronica to rest so that she, her mother, could be there for her. And that was in October. And what now of this sweet little girl? Gone forever, yet in the arms of the angels. Ever since her death, our family spent her birthday 2 days before Christmas at her gravesite, reflecting, remembering, then releasing 6 pink balloons for the 6 sweet and joyous years we had her, and 1 white balloon for each year without her. To our everlasting dismay, a part of our son, Ian, died when she did. Indeed, a part of each of us has. I recall that tribute I wrote. I poured it out from my heart, and I could never make it through it without breaking down. At the time of her funeral, I steeled myself with a dedication to deliver it without crying, even though it would be understandable. I personally felt I needed to deliver it to her without a breakdown. I will try now to do the same. My little angel, there is immense pain left in the wake of your passing. Torn from our loving embrace, we still have profound difficulty in comprehending, much less accepting it. Sweetheart, when I think of you, I see your sensitive brown eyes, those loving eyes that always expressed your soft and gentle nature. I'll never forget the sweet, warm innocence that your eyes expressed, as if kissed by the sun's warm rays. I reflect back and think of the world through a child's eyes, such a magical and hopeful time, full of hopes, wishes, and fantasies. You were but 6 years old and growing fast, tall for your age, very much like your father was when he was growing up. And you had your whole life ahead of you, a life full of promise, dreams, and as many possibilities as there were stars in the evening sky. You certainly knew how to have fun too, and relished playing whenever and wherever opportunity availed itself. Whether it was on the swing set at the playground, pleading to go ever higher, swinging like a monkey on the monkey bars, or spinning on the carousel for all it was worth, or indeed spinning on the tire swing for all I was worth. You certainly enjoyed yourself to the absolute fullest. I think of the walks we took with Grandma and Claire. You used to giggle when Claire tried to lick your boo-boos. She always tried to help. We had so many fun times together, times that grandparents especially enjoy. Flying kites in the park, riding in the Jeep with the top down while the breeze whipped through your hair, hiking on pine-scented mountain trails, fishing with your dad and catching your first fish, which was almost half your size, shuffling your feet through the brightly colored autumn leaves, or sledding down the hills tucked into your daddy's lap, coloring pictures and coloring books with all manner of crayons and markers. Grandma reading your favorite stories to you like Tinker Bell and Dr. Seuss. There seemed to be an endless number of things we could come up with. You loved the zoo and all of those crazy animals that lived there. So much so that you would forever ask Grandpa to play Gorilla Man and pick you up like a sack of potatoes while running around the house with reckless abandon, while your infectious giggles and squeals of delight had everybody in stitches. Times like those, or just relaxing with a vanilla ice cream cone. They were all good times. Oh yes, Grandma and I had many more plans of things to do with you, places to go, and people to meet, things we knew you would have loved. I am eternally grateful that we were able to share these precious joys, fleeting as they were, with such a beautiful and cherished grandchild as you were. We were truly blessed to have had you in our life. And now, my love, the time has come. Though I shall not say goodbye, my thoughts are like soft whispers lost unto a mournful wind. And until the time we shall meet rejoicingly once again, bequeathed to heaven's loving embrace, I will sorrowfully bid you farewell, my little one, my love. Farewell, my angel. Farewell. I wanted to thank the prosecution, the jury. You did an incredible job, and you left nothing lacking. However, in retrospect, having witnessed the proceedings of this trial in this court, I'm left with a distinct and despairing feeling that justice was not served, but indeed was undermined in a deceptively perjurious manner that not only makes a mockery of our very justice system, but is in fact an immoral, reprehensible, and perhaps most importantly, a completely illegal act. When the very system we as a society rely upon is compromised, it leaves us with no hope whatsoever for justice to be carried out. I would challenge the murderer to do the correct thing for once during this trial and petition the court to be fittingly executed by firing squad. Thank you.
Mr. Sullivan, let me ask you, what is that opinion based on in terms of what you called immoral and a lack of justice, a miscarriage of justice? What is it that you observed here that you thought was immoral?
The fact, okay, let me go back to when the jury was canvassed, when you were picking the jury. I have a copy of the jury questionnaire. I've gone through it thoroughly, and I have since highlighted and marked the specific questions that were essentially to weed out anyone who came in with a plan to deceive, as a plant would be, or someone with their own moral crusade. The fact that at every stage when a verdict was rendered, as quick as it was and unanimous, only to come back at the final verdict, as quick as it was, indicates complete deception, as deceitful as he was when he planned this. I find that reprehensible. And because of that, I even asked George, before the verdict was rendered, if the case were found to be that a juror committed perjury, would he go after them? He indicated he would not. I understand his position, but I don't agree with it. That juror that abstained, I would put on the stand, and I guarantee you, even I, a layman, could take her apart. I could find the deception and the lie, because you don't go through those phases as quick as you did, only to come back when it comes time for the verdict. And when the other jurors found that this one wasn't going to move, she's intransigent, you're there with a moral purpose, and it's to save this one from the death sentence. That is making a mockery of our justice system. I would like to see the court go after that juror.
All right, thank you. You know, I understand that people are hurting. I can't say that I know what that feels like because I haven't been through it. But while it's okay to express the suffering and the pain and the hurt, I don't think it's appropriate to speculate. Now, if somebody has specific evidence that they want to present to the court, that's different. But we had 24 people who are citizens of the community who agreed to make a huge sacrifice to serve on the jury. 12 of those ended up deliberating. I don't have any basis in front of me or any reason that anyone has presented to support that there was deception by anyone. If somebody has information that they would like to present to me, specific information, not speculation or conjecture, then present it. But otherwise, I am not going to allow people to criticize this jury. That's unfair and that's improper. As far as I know, this jury listened to the evidence and followed my instructions. The fact that they could not agree on a death sentence doesn't mean that there was a juror who was deceptive or that there was a juror who came into the process and perjured herself because she wanted to vote for a life sentence. That's a huge leap. And I'm not going to allow that that type of criticism to be uttered without evidence. I think that's improper. That's a very serious accusation. And I think it's unfair to the jurors. There have been jurors present here today. There's still one that I see in the back. And the least we can do is to be grateful for their willingness to do what they did, to give us their time. There were a lot of people who came to the courtroom during jury selection who were not willing to serve. And these folks were willing to give us their time and to do this very, very difficult task. I can't imagine a tougher case to be a juror on. I mean, in terms of how much time they gave us, in terms of the graphic images they had to see, in terms of the emotional testimony they had to hear. This was a difficult task, and there's no reason to believe that anyone on the jury was deceptive or that anyone did anything improper. All right, Ms. Stitch McGuire, call your next witness, please. Ms. Pearson.
Your Honor, I'm going to read a statement from Heather Dearman. It's Heatherdearman, and she is a cousin of Ashley Mosier and Veronica Mosier Sullivan. Not one soul who knows what happened to Ashley can ever come close to experiencing what she did. No one should have to. Losing a beautiful, sweet, innocent 6-year-old daughter and losing the hope and the joy of looking forward to becoming a mother for the second time, and on top of all of that, being told you are paralyzed while still grieving over the loss of your father just a few weeks earlier. And this happened. It happened to the sweetest, gentlest, most humble mother that I know. All of this at the hands of one person who chose hate instead of love and calculated a most horrific, devastating, and evil crime. Enough said. That should say it all. I could end here, and I found myself conflicted about even saying anything else, because what could be worse? Nothing. But I wanted to make sure that people consider that this crime affected more lives than the ones of those in the theater. I am a City of Aurora employee who works with the heroic police officers and firefighters on a daily basis, and I know we have all seen the effect it had on them. I think about 720 every time I walk into my city building and every time I see a uniformed officer. I am also a citizen of Aurora and have encountered firsthand the aftermath it had on our community and our reputation. My husband and I are raising our 5 beautiful children in Aurora, and we are still experiencing the fallout of this crime with them. I had never taken for granted the joy and love my children bring into my life. The impact of July 20th only strengthened that, but it also caused seemingly irreconcilable thoughts of survivor's guilt for still having my blessings, while Ashley had a lifetime of feeling the loss of hers. My youngest daughter was 5 years old when it happened. Veronica was 6. For the longest time, I could not fully enjoy milestone moments with her because I would cry thinking about what Ashley was missing out on. The first day of school, mother-daughter breakfasts, artwork so lovingly made by her hand. I also found myself feeling another kind of guilt that I was not truly being present with my young daughter and enjoying those moments with her. What kind of parent was I? Ever since the shooting, she often talks to me about her worries of me dying. Like most young children, she tells me how much she loves me every night, but 4 times in a row, making sure to say it again as I am walking out the door, in a clingy, worrisome voice, almost like she's scared that she won't see me in the morning. No child should have that worry. This year she asked if she could speak at the vigil, and that's when I truly realized how deeply it touched her. The first words she spoke were, "Ever since the shooting, I have been hearing about people's feelings." A 7-year-old child having the composure to speak in front of a huge crowd and to say such a grown-up phrase that no child should ever have to say hit me like a rock. I also have a 26-year-old daughter who considers Ashley her best friend, an 18 and 17-year-old daughter, and a 14-year-old son. Each struggled with this tragedy in their own way and in different directions. All of them have always had kind, caring, and loving hearts, but the tear that this crime left in them is massive. I still can't reconcile within myself that maybe I intensified the despair that this tragedy put forth by letting it consume me from the beginning. Somehow, I may have been making it more important than my own husband and a bigger issue for my children than it should have been. But how could I not? I contribute the enormous magnitude of emotional trauma that my family and I are going through mostly to the fact that this crime was so unfathomable and large scale and that the whole world was watching. The never-ending media coverage added a whole other level of indescribable anxiety to me, my husband, my children, and my extended family. It was unprecedented. How do we help? How do we act? How do we feel? Relationships were tested, some broken. We had to wait until October to pay our respects to Veronica. It was crushing to hold on to letting go for 3 long months, while at the same time praying for a miracle for Ashley and constantly rallying together to support her. During those 3 months, I was doing my best to keep my children positive. I urged them to believe that the world is safe and ultimately good. I tried to convince them that they should not live in fear. After all, this crime is rare. Every parent wants their children to live happy, healthy lives, and to believe that they can. And then, shortly after surviving the grief from the funeral of a child, Newtown. I feel like I had lied to my children. It was July all over again. The same feelings resurfaced for us all. We were set back in our progress. The nightmares, the being afraid to go to school or out in public places hit them hard. Just like me, they battled with feeling guilty to be feeling hurt so deep. And it hasn't stopped since then, both the setbacks and the tragic events. These emotions are normal, but my heart bleeds for them that they have to feel so much torment each time. And the pain wouldn't be as deep had their 6-year-old cousin not been taken in such a cruel way. It took a while, until late last year actually, for me and my children to give ourselves the grace to know that we deserved and needed therapy to process all of this so that the level of hurt could be lessened. But none of my children will ever look at the world in the same way that they did before 7/20, and I will never stop questioning if I am doing the best that I can as a parent. But at least I still get to be a parent to my children. That privilege was stolen from Ashley. Heather Dearman.
Thank you. Mr. Orman?
This is a victim impact statement from Rita Lambert, and she calls herself the mother of Ashley Mosier, Veronica Mosier Sullivan, and baby Mosier. Just shy of 18, my daughter Ashley told me she was pregnant. As this type of surprising news comes to any mother, I was taken aback, but was soon ecstatic knowing that I was going to be a grandmother. Ashley mostly raised Veronica by herself, and I will always say that they grew up together. In comparing their baby and toddler pictures, Veronica was the spitting image of Ashley, but where Ashley was and is more reserved, Veronica had extra energy to spare. They had such fun together, giggling at silly things, just like little girls. Ashley took her everywhere she went. I don't think she went more than 24 hours at a time without Veronica by her side. 6-year-old Veronica was always glowing with life. She wanted to try everything and asked questions constantly and made friends wherever she went. She brought such joy to our home, her grandpa's home, and anyone else's home she was in. You definitely knew Veronica was around, as her peal of laughter could be heard every so often anywhere she went. She was so curious about things, asking thoughtful questions. You could see the look in her eye when processing the answer that she truly wanted to understand and soak up the information. She wanted to experience everything and anything, as her life was about all fun and exciting things she could do and the people she could spend time with. She had such a large personality, you could feel her energy as she walked into a room. She was smart, too. Not only good in school, but she understood adult conversations, sometimes much to our chagrin, and even asked questions that were applicable. She could also pick up on people's emotions and would be empathetic and consoling. I always thought she would be a great lawyer, though as the justification she came up with, when she made the wrong choice, were pretty amazing and well thought out. You just had to laugh at some of them, as sometimes they were pretty logical. The impact Veronica had on her parents, her grandparents, extended family and friends was huge and will always have to last us a lifetime. We will lovingly be reminded of her energy every time we see pictures of or think of her and smile. But I not only lost my daughter's daughter, but another grandchild, and a part of my child as she sits confined to a wheelchair because someone decided that their life was more important than these 3 most innocent and genuine children. There is a vast, open wound in my heart every time I think about Veronica and I pray that she didn't suffer as she fell from 4 bullets ripping the life out of her. And I'm reminded every time I see my beautiful daughter Ashley sitting in her wheelchair that her life was turned completely upside down and almost lost. When that bullet lodged in her spine, she not only lost her mobility, but lost part of herself and the most important person in her life that night, Veronica. And I've cried pools of tears, still experiencing waves of anger, of sadness, and of grief at the stupidity of how all our lives were changed, and I wonder how this could be happening to us, to Ashley. She doesn't deserve a life in a wheelchair or a motherless life, and I don't deserve not being a grandmother anymore. Every single day I think of Veronica and of my unborn grandchild. My thoughts wander several times a day to Ashley and how I wish things were different and easier for her. How I pray that I could take some of Ashley's pain away, even with so much of my own. I would gladly take some of hers so she could get a moment of peace. Rita Lambert, mother of Ashley Mosier, grandmother of Veronica Mosier, and baby Mosier.
Thank you. Mr. Brockwell?
Your Honor, with the court's permission, I'm going to read a victim impact statement, and I wanted to make an argument at the end of all the statements that we'd provide. But if the court would permit me to take an issue out of order only because it's recently come up and it invoked me in some way, I'd appreciate that.
Go ahead.
First off, I don't have any clue what these victims are going through, and Mr. Sullivan as well. And for that, I consider myself blessed. And I understand that there are those who are not only unhappy with the outcome, but have found reason to question perhaps how that outcome came about. I am not one of those people, and I want to make it clear here on the record that while I have never predetermined what action I would take on a speculative set of facts that have never been brought before me, what I was predetermined to do, and this was the conversation I had with Mr. Sullivan, was that I was predetermined never to question the outcome of the jury, even if it was one with which I disagreed. Had that jury come back unanimously in favor of the outcome that I pursued, I would have fully expected people to accept that verdict, and I would have rebuffed criticism of the motives that would have led the jury to that outcome. And I do the same here, even if it's the outcome that I did not think was justice. I have nothing but respect for these jurors, all of them, all the ones, and to some extent, even the alternates more so than the deliberators, for what they were asked to endure. And I've said this publicly, and I will continue to say this. They were asked to do something that no one else in this process was asked to do. They were asked to endure all of this, to take all this in, and to share it with no one. I don't know what that's like. I had these folks at the table. I had our victim advocates. I had my wife, my kids. We could talk about anything and everything. They could not. This court instructed the jury 10 times at least in the instructions that this was a matter of individual reason, moral judgment. I have every confidence that they all went into that believing and honoring those words, and that this outcome was the product of exactly that. Without taking anything away from the pain of Mr. Sullivan or the concerns that he or others may have, I just want to make it clear that as the district attorney in this jurisdiction, I do not share those thoughts.
I appreciate you saying that. There was one other thing that I would add to what we asked the jury to do that none of us had to do, and that is make the decisions that they made. You may have made arguments, both sides, but ultimately, you were not making the decision, the jury was, and only the jurors were asked to do that. So in addition to the time that we requested from them, in addition to the emotional testimony they had to hear, in addition to the graphic images they saw, in addition to all the things they endure without talking to anyone about what they were experiencing in the courtroom, not even with each other, they had to make decisions along the way that are difficult decisions to make, and especially at the very end, the very last decision. And they were the only ones in this room that were asked to do that, and they were the only ones who had to do that. And that is a difficult thing, but I very much appreciate your comments.
Yes, sir.
You may proceed.
Thank you, sir. This is a victim impact statement from Jim Lambert, the step-grandfather of Veronica Mosier Sullivan, and I imagine everyone remembers Veronica, but she was the 6-year-old girl that he murdered by shooting 4 times with an assault rifle. Here's a picture. No, you got that? Here is a picture of Veronica and how we still picture her in our hearts and minds. She was outgoing, smart, loving, always happy, loved to play and read. She also loved to smile and loved chocolate cake and ice cream, as well as watching SpongeBob SquarePants and Mickey Mouse. She had an amazing future ahead of her, and she was robbed of a beautiful life. We all were robbed of seeing her grow up. She was our future, the best and brightest. She wanted to be a lawyer, doctor, princess, teacher, or a rock star. She could have been any of these and more. Veronica was trusting and honest and adored her mother, grandmother, family, and friends. She always brightened the room wherever she went. She loved life, pillow fights, exploring in the woods, and her smile was brighter than the sun. She could melt anyone's heart. She melted mine. She was a major piece of all our hearts and lives, and now she is gone forever, and our lives will never be the same. Our hearts are broken and will never truly be healed. Veronica's grandmother, my wife, was very close to Veronica, and she has not been the same since this useless tragedy happened. My wife has the biggest heart out of anyone I have ever known, and now a big piece of her heart, Veronica, is gone. Veronica can never be replaced, and my wife and stepdaughter Ashley will never be the same, as will any of us. Jim Lambert, Veronica's step-grandfather.
Thank you. Mr. Edson?
Your Honor, thank you. I have a victim impact statement from John Hook, H-O-O-K, grandfather of Jesse Childress, if I may.
You may.
This victim impact statement is entitled Jesse Childress and the Traitor, T-R-A-I-T-O-R. Jesse Childress died a cyber warrior hero at the hands of a traitor. He served his country as a cyber systems operator with the 310th Space Wing and an honored airman staff sergeant who helped fellow soldiers. The traitor killed 12 people and wounded 70 others to focus on improving his own self-worth. Jesse came from a long line of patriotic warriors. His great-grandfather served in France during World War I as a flight engineer. His grandfather was a Cold War warrior in France in the late 50s. His mother serves as an early childhood educator at Edwards Air Force Base. His 2 brothers are in the United States Army and United States Air Force. The traitor dropped out of graduate school. My first grandchild had a promising career in the Air Force and was working on a college degree with the GI Bill. He bought a townhouse in preparation for a future family. Jesse was honored as a Soldier of the Month at his base because he helped others and loved team sports. We were so proud of him. He died a hero's death when he covered his first sergeant and wife as well as the female airmen he was training. The traitor shot Jesse in the back and destroyed our future with him. Jesse faced failure in school and sports along with many successes. He worked hard to improve himself during Army and Air Force service and overcame adversity. The traitor rejected our country that supported his education, the military who protected him, and his family who loved him by this horrendous carnage he prepared with a selfish mindset. He sacrificed Jesse Childress and 11 others needlessly. Sincerely, Grandpa John.
Thank you. Ms. Stitch McGuire?
Thank you, Your Honor. Your Honor, Ashley Mosier is here today in the audience, and she asked that I play a brief clip of Veronica's third birthday.
You may.
Thank you. Thank you, Your Honor. This is a statement of Ashley Mosier. Veronica. Veronica was my life and the reason I lived. It's hard to know where to begin. I loved having someone to take care of and a reason to want to get up every day and a reason to want to go to work and to go to school because I wanted to do everything I could to provide for my daughter and to work for a better future for myself and for Veronica. Not waking up to her every morning, not hearing her laugh, not hugging her, not helping her get ready for the day is incredibly hard, and it never gets any easier. I had Veronica when I was 18 years old, and we struggled financially our entire lives. We moved a lot, we didn't have a lot of money, and now I finally have a stable place to live, but it's not a home because Veronica was my home. Veronica was such a happy, positive person, and she brought so much joy into the world and brought happiness to the lives of everyone she met. You could not help but to remember Veronica, even if you only met her once. I know people won't believe me, and some people think that you only start to remember positive things about people once they die. But honestly, it's the truth. I can't even remember a single time Veronica ever complained about a single thing in her entire life. Veronica was so happy, in fact, that one time I brought her to a therapist because I thought there had to be something wrong with her because she was so excessively happy. The therapist noted that she was a child who was a little hyper and had lots of energy, but the therapist assured me that I was just very lucky because otherwise Veronica was such a happy and content child. In the months leading up to the shooting, my dad was fighting a battle with cancer. I spent many of those months leading up to the shooting taking care of my dying father. Sadly, my dad passed away on May 20th, 2012, 2 months before the shooting. My dad's funeral was the day of Veronica's kindergarten graduation. Because I was attending my father's funeral, I was not able to attend Veronica's graduation, not knowing at the time that Veronica would never have another graduation for me to attend. I'll never know what career Veronica would have chosen when she grew up, and I don't know exactly how she would have contributed to the world, but I do know that she never would have hurt anyone, and she never would have caused the type of pain that the defendant has caused to thousands. Me. After I learned that Veronica was murdered and that my unborn baby was murdered, the hardest thing for me was coming to terms with the fact that I may never be able to be a mother again. I was about to be a mother of 2 children, and now I don't know if I can ever have kids again. My heart is broken at the thought of never being a mother again. It was my entire identity. Ironically, the due date for my unborn baby was my deceased father's birthday, and I was hoping to have a baby boy and hoping to have another way to celebrate life on my father's birthday every year. That too was stolen from me by the defendant. After realizing that I would never be a mother again, the next hardest thing was finding out that I was a quadriplegic and that I might never be able to move my arms or legs again. I spent 6 months at hospitals and at Craig Rehabilitation Center drowning in the grief of Veronica's murder and my unborn baby's murder, and I also had to figure out a way to regain my physical strength in the process. We had to postpone Veronica's funeral for several months because I was not physically strong enough to even sit up long enough in a wheelchair to attend the funeral. It's an awful feeling to know that you are not physically strong enough to bury your little girl. Because of my paralysis, the months of rehabilitation were incredibly hard. I had to relearn how to do everything, from the normal tasks like brushing my teeth, to combing my hair, to eating, to feeding myself. And then I had to learn new things, like learning how to transform myself from a wheelchair to a bed at night by myself. It was almost a year after the shooting before I could do that by myself. And to this day, I have to have someone spot me while I do the transfer so I don't fall on the ground with no one to help me. Also, when you're paralyzed, it completely strips away your independence, and it completely is demoralizing and embarrassing in several respects. For 1 year, I had an external urine bag, exposing my urine to the world at all times. Since then, I had a surgery that allows me to self-catheterize myself, but this device, called a stoma, leaks all the time, and because of the leaking, I have urine on my clothes daily. During the surgery, they used part of my intestines to create a pathway for the opening for the stoma. And because of that, I constantly get urinary tract infections. And because I'm paralyzed, I cannot tell from the pain that the infections are getting really bad. And I constantly end up back in the hospital from these infections. In fact, I was just back in the hospital last week. One of the most embarrassing things about being paralyzed is that I need to have a nurse or someone stimulate my anus manually in order to relieve my bowels every morning. I have to have someone bathe my genitals. I have to ask to have my legs shaved. Being stripped of your privacy and dignity in these ways is something no one should ever have to experience. It takes 3 hours every morning with my CNA to do my bowel program, shower, and get dressed just to leave the house. It's extremely hard to make morning appointments, making things like getting to court in the morning to attend trial extremely difficult because of this 3-hour routine I have each and every morning. Luckily, after years of hard work and physical therapy, I was able to regain the use of my arms. However, I still don't have control of my stomach muscles, so when I drop things, it's generally impossible for me to get them. And I can't even do simple tasks like putting my hair in a ponytail because I simply don't have the core strength to keep my body upright. Also, I have extreme nerve pain in my legs. It doesn't seem fair that I am paralyzed and yet also have to be in physical pain every day. The only time the pain subsides is when I go swimming. The grief and the trauma alone make it really hard for me to want to get up every morning, especially knowing that I have a 3-hour routine, and that makes it more difficult. And because I always need help, I don't get to be alone when I want to be alone. A 28-year-old woman should get to be alone in the morning if she wants to be. Also, there are many things that I used to love to do that I don't get to do anymore. I grew up as a ballerina. I loved to dance, and that was taken away from me by the defendant. I also used to love to go to outdoor festivals with Veronica. Not only can I not go to them anymore, but it's extremely difficult to navigate through groups of people in a wheelchair when I do decide to go anywhere. One of the hardest things is that it's so hard for me to be around children now. Because of this, I avoid children in my own family, and I haven't seen my little cousins or been able to participate in many family functions because it's too hard for me to be around little kids. I feel guilty about this, and it eats me up inside, but I just know that it's something I can't do at this time. After I left the hospital 6 months after the shooting, I was having a lot of memory issues. Craig Hospital had me come back to test me for brain injuries. Because of the shooting, I have cognitive issues that I never had before. The hospital staff believe that I sustained the injuries during the time I was unconscious after the shooting when my brain was deprived of oxygen. I have trouble concentrating and focusing. Adult Protective Services was so concerned about me that they tried to put me in a senior living center. I had to prove to them that I had enough family and friends with me at all times so that they did not place me in a home for invalids and strip me of the little independence I had left. I was on a summer break from school during July 20th of 2012. I was supposed to start LPN or licensed practical nurse school in August of 2012. Because of my injuries, I could not go to school. I tried to go back to school and regain my life too early during the fall of 2013. However, it was too hard for me physically, emotionally, and intellectually at the time. I thought the reason I had a hard time focusing in school was because I was on so much pain medicine for the nerve pain in my legs. So I fought long and hard to stop taking pain medicine in the hopes that it would make concentrating in school easier. It turned out, however, that it was the cognitive issues from the shooting that was making school much harder for me. I used to be a straight A student. Now, it takes me 5 times as long to study and retain information for school. Your Honor, for me, the only thing that would have even come close to getting justice for Veronica would have been if the defendant would have been sentenced to the death penalty, or if he could have been forced to live as a quadriplegic, a sentence he gave to me and Stefan and Caleb, or if the defendant could have been shot 4 times, like he shot Veronica. I know that Your Honor cannot sentence the defendant to those things, but I would ask you to think about how the defendant has altered the course of the lives of thousands by his evil, selfish actions, and sentence him to the maximum possible penalty you can under the law. Thank you very much, Ashley Mosier.
All right, thank you. It's 5 after 5, so let's go ahead and adjourn. In terms of the, for scheduling purposes, Ms. Teach-McGuire, approximately how many more folks are you anticipating wishing to address the court?
I think we have approximately 40 more, Your Honor.
Okay, so we'll plan for all day tomorrow, and then we'll probably have counsel's comments on Wednesday, and then my sentence on Wednesday as well. Okay?
Thank you, Your Honor.
All right, anything else at this time on behalf of the people before we break for the day? No, Mr. Brockler? No? Mr. King? No. All right, the court will be in recess. Thank you.